so that was my sister at home and at school. And another characteristic of my sister, which was very interesting, was that she loved to tell stories. You know, she was very communicative, and well, in fact, she talked a lot. I would say that she used to drive my mom crazy because every day after lunch, while she helped my mom, wash the dishes and, do the washing up in the kitchen, she would tell my mother every stupid joke she had heard at school from her friends. And my sister was the kind of person that was always in a good mood, and she enjoyed a good laugh. And you could make my sister laugh very easily. You could tell her any stupid joke, and she would laugh her ass off. So anyway, my mother had to put up with that because she had to tell my mom every little story of her days. Um, okay, but why I'm telling you this story? Well, it's because when my sister was about 16 years old, she was born in 1966, and in 1982, when she was 16 years old, and at around, well, the time of the year, it was July, and it was the 1982 World Cup in Spain. And I remember that because that afternoon, I mean, the story that I'm telling you, something big happened uh, one day in the afternoon in July 1982. Well, my sister had a gym class in the afternoon, and right after lunch, she got on her bicycle. Actually, she got on my brother's bicycle to go to school for her gym practice. And well, she never came back. My sister had an accident on the way to school. She fell off her bicycle going down a hill, and she hit the pavement with her head. And I don't know much about the specifics of how she was rescued and taken to the hospital, but what I guess is that she fell off her bicycle, hit her head on the pavement, and became unconscious. She passed out. Probably somebody driving by saw that teenager lying on the floor, lying on the ground, and they stopped and they picked her up and took her to the hospital. I don't know exactly when, but I guess she probably went into a coma immediately because for the next 5 days she was in a coma in a hospital. And 5 days later, she passed away. And as you can imagine, uh, this was an event of devastating consequences to us. And I say devastating because actually, only now, almost 40 years later, is that I've come to understand the huge impact that the loss of my sister, the huge impact that her death had on our lives. I was only 14 years old at the time. And I remember that I can't explain why, maybe through, or maybe because of a sort of a defense mechanism. I I tried to be strong, and I tried to deal with the death of my sister as something natural that could happen to anybody. And but the reality is, uh, I cried. I cried a lot when my sister died, but I only cried twice. And the reason why I'm making this video, it's because I've learned recently that my sister's story, her story of life, is also it's in fact it's actually it's a beautiful story, and I realized that it's a story that should be told, should be shared, and and I think that lessons that I've learned because of my sister's death I think they should be shared, and that perhaps what I've learned, and if I share what I've learned with other people, I guess, uh, I don't know, but maybe there are people out there who might have had the same problem and might learn with my story. So anyway, we had a funeral, and I tried, and during the funeral, I tried to be a good boy. I tried to help my parents, because lots of relatives came to town for the funeral. And in those days, we used to have what we would call in English perhaps a memorial service, right? In Latin cultures, basically we mourn the person for 24 hours before actually we bury them, before we take them to a cemetery. Normally this is a 24-hour thing. So anyway, my sister's body was brought to my house, and we spent the night, you know, receiving relatives and visitors and the neighbors who who came to pay their respects for my sister's passing. And I remember that I behaved like somebody who, I mean, I'm not proud of it, but I'm not also embarrassed about it. It just happened. I behaved like somebody who was working at a hotel, and somehow I had to make sure that everybody was taken care of. And I don't know if that was because that was my defense mechanism. So that way I kind of distracted myself and didn't pay much attention that my sister had died. But I remember vividly that perhaps even subconsciously, I avoid uh, my house's living room because that's where the coffin with my sister's body had been placed. And my mother sat next to her all the time. My mom never left her side. And I remember, and I remember now avoiding the living room. But somehow in the middle of the night, I forgot, and I walked past, and I walked through the living room, and my mother saw me, and then she literally grabbed me and said, "Oh, Junior," because my name is Alfredo Domingos Branco Junior. I've got my father's name, and at home, my relatives and everybody calls me Junior. So anyway, my mom called me and she said, "Junior, come over here. Look at your sister. Isn't she beautiful? Isn't that terrible that she passed away?" Well, and at that moment, I collapsed and I burst into tears and I cried a lot because I looked into the coffin and I saw my sister lying there. And I remember how powerful that image was to me. Anyway, I didn't stay very long because it was very painful to me, and I left the living room. My mom stayed there, and I know it sounds terrible because I should have supported my mom. I should have been there for her, and I should have comforted her perhaps a little bit more. But the thing is, I don't think I had at the time what it takes to do that kind of thing. So anyway, my sister was buried the next day. But just before, but a few hours before she was buried, her body was taken, her coffin was taken to a church, a church that my family, I mean, most of my relatives used to go to. And and then there in that church, it was an Adventist church, and the pastor, he kind of gave a sermon. Um, this was kind of, I believe, this was kind of the part of the memorial service that my family had prepared for my sister. And then again, I guess, in order to avoid the, I think, I think that in order to avoid facing my feelings, I stayed outside the church, you know, in front of the church on the pavement, on the sidewalk, talking to my cousins, talking to other people, and trying to remain cool, like, okay, I'm a cool teenager. I can handle this. Don't worry about me, and so on. But at some point during the service inside the church, one of my cousins came outside and invited me to come in and asked that my parents wanted me to come and be present for the last part of the service, for the last part of the sermon. And I sat down and I was fine until a close uh, friend of mine, actually, she was my cousin, until a cousin of mine came, sat next to me, and then she kind of put her arms around me and kind of embraced me, and because she felt she had to comfort me. And up to that moment, I I I I, I had thought that I was okay, but actually I wasn't. It seems that I was kind of bottling inside, all my feelings, all that pain. And then for the second time, when my sister put her arms around me and she very nicely and with a very loving and soft voice, she spoke to me, I burst into tears again, and I couldn't stop crying. And that was it. As far as I remember, that was the last time I cried.